between crying and then not crying and being comatose. She said very little.
I'm going to stop you right there. You said the word comatose. Did you mean literally comatose, or did you mean shocked?
Shocked.
Okay. So when you encountered your daughter and she was in the condition that you described, what, if anything, did you do next?
I took her in my arms, put her in the car, and we drove back to her home.
All right. At that time that you took her in your arms, that you put her in the car and you drove home, when you say home, do you mean Andrea's home?
Yes.
Because it was very nearby?
Yes.
Did you know that Rusty had been shot?
I knew something very terrible had happened to Rusty.
Had any police officer at that time told you that Rusty had been shot?
No.
Did any civilian at that point tell you that Rusty had been shot?
No.
Did Andrea tell you at that point that Rusty had been shot?
I don't believe she was capable of telling us anything.
That's no, she did not?
I don't think she said anything.
Thank you. You said you got back in the car and you went to the house. Who was in the car with you?
My husband, our daughter, and I believe our son.
That's your son, Todd?
Yes.
Do you know how it was that Todd arrived at the daycare? You mentioned that you and your husband were alone in the car. How did Todd get there?
He arrived shortly, almost at the same time that we did.
Had you seen him before you pulled around to the back, as you described, to get Andrea by the back of the daycare?
Yes.
He was with you at that time?
Yes.
When you pulled around the back of the daycare to get Andrea, was Todd in the car with you and your husband?
Yes.
Where was his car? Do you know?
Somewhere near the crime scene.
So, as I understand it, now the four of you are in the car.
Yes.
And you're going to Andrea's house, is that right?
Yes.
Where were you seated in the car?
I was in the back holding Andrea.
Andrea was in the back with you?
Yes.
Who was driving?
My husband.
Was he driving his car or your car? Or
Yes.
his car? Was there any discussion in the car on the way to Andrea's house?
We were all in shock. We didn't know what happened.
Were you frustrated that you didn't know what happened?
Absolutely.
Would you have expected, let's try that. You wanted to tell me earlier, tell me now, why was it that you were going to Andrea's home?
When we arrived at the crime scene, we were told, we identified ourselves,
As whom?
Andrea's parents, and that Rusty was our son-in-law.
Okay.
Someone told me, or asked me, I understand you live nearby. You should go home. I looked at him and said, we just came from home. Where is our son-in-law? What has happened to our son-in-law? And where is our daughter?
You were describing this conversation. Were you speaking with someone who was dressed as a police officer, or were you speaking to someone who was in plain clothes? Do you recall?
I recall it was Sergeant Cordellino.
Okay, you now know it was Sergeant Cordellino. Did you know him at the time?
No.
Okay. And who, if you know, is Sergeant Cordellino employed by?
The Dunwoody Police Department?
The Dunwoody Police Department. All right, so it's your testimony that a representative of the Dunwoody Police Department told you to go home. Is that right?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this will be a good pause location at this point in time. We will resume after this break. When I give you this break, ladies and gentlemen, just have a seat for a minute, ladies and gentlemen, in my jury box, that is. If you want to stand and stretch, lawyers, you can, but do not discuss the case or allow anyone to discuss the case with you. Do not remain upon the floor when I release you at this point in time. I know one of the jurors had communicated they had to do something. This is your opportunity to do what you brought to my attention yesterday. Do not read or look at any media coverage pertaining to this case. Do not go upon the internet and do any research about this case. Do not blog about this case while it's ongoing. Do not go to any location that may have been made reference to. All the evidence must come to you in the form of sworn testimony from the witness stand and anything that's introduced during the course of the trial. You're more than welcome to bring something to snack and or eat with you during the afternoon session. Do not consume any alcoholic beverages during this lunch break. Deputy Garrett is going to turn back over to you your cell phone, and your communication devices. However, do not text about this case, do not email about this case, do not receive any telephonic messages about this case while it's ongoing. As I mentioned earlier, the lawyers and the parties cannot talk or interact with you. I don't ever want you to think they're being rude or discourteous. As I have mentioned to you several times, if you do decide to have a meal here in the Decatur area, you're more than welcome, but do not sit next to anyone who may be discussing this case or allow anyone to sit next to you who may be discussing the case. You have two options: either move away from them or tell them to move away from you, but do not engage in any conversations with anyone about this case while it's ongoing. I need you to maintain an open mind at this point in time. Now, we're going to be on break until 1:30. I need each and every one of you to be present and accounted for there in the jury room at 1:30 so we can resume. Deputy Garrett, want to recess to 1:30?
All right. All right, 11 Alive's continuing coverage of the trial of Andrea Snyderman. We thank you for being with us today. It's lunchtime, 90-minute break. I'm Jeff Hellinger, along with Kelly Burke, who is the former district attorney of Houston County. We have had the occasion to listen to Shana Citron, former friend of Andrea Snyderman today, and we have heard from Bonnie Greenberg, who has been on